안녕하세요. 키드니 플러그인입니다. 이번 에피소드에서는 에릭 치님이 다시 돌아왔습니다. 에릭의 형 앨런도 저희와 함께 했는데요. 사실 앨런은 과거 신장기증을 받은 수혜자입니다. 이번 플러그인 호스트인 라미안과 함께 그의 신장질병과 신장이식 여정을 들으실 준비가 되셨나요? 이 여정에서 에릭 또한 신장기증자로서 거쳐야 할 여정들을 이번 에피소드에서 저희에게 공유해 주셨습니다. 함께라는 주제로 앨런과 에릭 형제의 우애, 서로를 향한 아낌없는 지지와 가족의 단합력으로 신장질병을 극복해 나가는 그들의 특별한 이야기를 들으실 준비가 되셨나요? 이제 곧 시작하니 여러분 모두 채널 고정!
The first time that I noticed anything awry would have been Canada Day in 2014. I was with friends at the lake and I noticed I had a severe headache and it persisted even after we went home. Even a week later, I had a really strong headache.
I remember the day that Alan called me. I was out for lunch with my wife and her family, and don't commonly get a phone call in this day and age, so look down and see it's my brother calling and think, oh, he probably just needs something. Take the call, and he lets me know that he had to go to the emergency. I gotta say, I was quite scared. I was worried. So they got the results, and it was not exactly what we were hoping for.
My day-to-day life was getting pretty heavily impacted by my kidney disease. I was shaking. I didn't know what to think about it. I like I said, thought I was prepared. I said, yes, let's do it. But after I hung up, I just sat there for a moment thinking to myself, like, what's happening? Like, how is this gonna look?
Hi, Alan. Welcome to Plugged In. Can I get you to introduce yourself to our viewers?
Of course. My name is Alan Chi, and I'm a kidney transplant recipient.
Hi, I'm Eric. I'm the brother of Alan Chi. I'm his younger brother, 2 years younger than him.
So tell us about the diagnosis and how you felt at diagnosis.
Well, one of the first things that I didn't do was tell my mom. So when I was in the hospital and they admitted me, I think I messaged Eric, my brother, to say, don't tell mom, because I didn't know the true severity of things yet, and I didn't want to worry my mom unnecessarily. And so we really waited, I guess I really waited until a point where I felt like this was kind of how it was going to shake out.
When we heard about the diagnosis, we had already spent a couple of days with Alan at the hospital, and we were, hanging out with him, trying to keep his spirits up. But we're also curious as to what the actual underlying reason was.
It was a bit of a roundabout process. There was a bit of confusion as to whether or not there may have been a clerical error when my blood results were received. But by the time that it was ironed out and we knew for sure that the results were mine,
we heard from the physician and Alan that the diagnosis was chronic kidney disease and specifically IgA nephropathy.
It was almost relief, because in my mind, it potentially could have been worse.
We were also kind of relieved to know what was going on, because I think we had a lot of questions swiveling in our heads, thinking about what the implications might be and what the long-term consequences and all that.
And kidney disease is something that I feel more confident about than maybe some of the other things that were ringing around in my head.
So to know exactly what it was and to think about what treatment plans there may be and start going down that route instead of just questions in our head, I think was a little bit relieving, but also daunting too, knowing that it's a chronic kidney disease and it could progress pretty significantly and end up progressing quite significantly.
Initially, after diagnosis, I was actually admitted to the hospital due to extremely high blood pressure and what was called a risk for a cardiac event. And so it was a bit of a shock and a little bit scary, but very quickly, with the help of the amazing staff that were taking care of me, I was reassured that it's not a major issue, we'll get through it. And I started doing a lot of reading on kidney disease.
We started to Google like crazy about just different chronic kidney diseases and the relation between one or another, and you hear about the more common ones, but this one, IgA nephropathy, what sounded like it came out of, like I had never even heard of it before.
We had no past cases of kidney problems within our family. And so finding this out was a bit of a shock.
We started to really do some more deep dives on it. And it was certainly illuminating to understand what was kind of going on at like a cellular level and what's going on in the body.
It took a bit of time to process, but surprisingly, I kind of moved through it faster than I anticipated. And within a couple of weeks, I was feeling pretty confident about how to tackle this challenge.
At the end of the day, it's another chronic kidney disease. And I think that's kind of how we approached it, was what can we as a family do to support Alan?
Alan, can you explain to us, you had that initial relief once you got the diagnosis, but what was the process like knowing that you now needed to tell your friends and family and the emotions that went along with that?
I wasn't super keen on sharing for the sake of sharing, at least at the beginning. But later on, as I realized that this is something that could potentially affect plenty of people, I first urged people to get checked, and then I kind of shared a little bit more about what my diagnosis looked like. But ultimately, when I did go to my friends and family to talk about it, they're all very supportive and they were very curious, which was great because that curiosity might be the difference between them, ending up in the hospital unknowingly versus catching it early.
Did you have to go on dialysis?
I did. By the time that I required dialysis, my day-to-day life was getting pretty heavily impacted by my kidney disease. I was getting a condition called gout regularly for spans of months at a time. And the unfortunate part about gout is that it creates effectively arthritis in various joints in your body. And so it was a huge relief to be able to go into dialysis because it would help me manage the gout to a better extent.
You talked a little bit about dialysis. When you eventually did have to go on dialysis, how did life change and what kind of dialysis did you go on, and can you explain that situation a little bit more to us?
So a couple of years after diagnosis, in February of 2019, I had my peritoneal dialysis catheter inserted, and shortly after that, after some training, began peritoneal dialysis. When I was asked which type of dialysis I'd like to go with, there were recommendations for especially my lifestyle and my level of independence to take peritoneal dialysis, which offered the freedom in terms of when I dialyze, as well as being able to do it at home, which was an enormous advantage for me versus hemodialysis, where I'd have to go into the hospital or a dialysis clinic. So as for the day-to-day of dialysis, it was a pretty big transition at first. Boxes and boxes and boxes of dialysate, the fluid that would end up in my body, started showing up. And at the time we lived in a condo, so we ended up filling an entire wall full of these materials, which we didn't know how to deal with. We had just tons of boxes. In addition to that, the dialysis machine, being about 40 pounds and a decent size, sat on my bedside table. And it's not super quiet, and it does beep sometimes. And so my then fiance, fortunately, is a very heavy sleeper. And so she didn't really have any problems with it. I, on the other hand, am a relatively light sleeper. And so it was a little bit of an adjustment to get used to the idea of this machine humming along throughout the night.
So did being on peritoneal dialysis mean that you were able to travel, or how did travel change?
So peritoneal dialysis does allow you to travel, and the team that works with the health authorities are amazing. They will get in touch with your destination to ensure that the products that you need for dialysis are shipped there and waiting for you by the time you arrive. The logistics are all handled behind the scenes. All you need to do is just let them know that, hey, we're going here on these dates, and they'll just make the magic happen. You have to take your machine with you, which, like I said, is a little unwieldy, but ultimately, you can go to so many different places despite being on peritoneal dialysis.
Do you want to share with us a place that you actually vacationed to while you were on peritoneal dialysis?
We actually went on our honeymoon while I was on peritoneal dialysis. And we actually encountered a few minor hiccups when the airline in Korea did not want to allow the dialysis machine on board. And through the language barrier, we managed to get things sorted out, but there was definitely a period of time where I was pretty concerned. what ended up needing to happen was we sailed the dialysis machine to the island that we were visiting, and it didn't show up for a day or two. When we received the call at the post office to go pick up the machine, they handed me a box that was much smaller than my dialysis machine and much, much lighter. So we had the wrong package. We ended up having to work with the Postal Authority using their CCTV cameras to identify where the dialysis machine ended up. So there was a period of a few days where I was in contact with that company that manages the logistics about what our fail-safe scenarios are. We ended up identifying a hospital in Korea, but fortunately I didn't have to go there because the machine was found and delivered fairly quickly after the problem was raised. And so every other situation that we've gone traveling, we've had no issues. And so this is the one hiccup, and it was solved very quickly.
I remember this one specific situation at the hospital where I think I was coping. I wasn't processing it very well. And the next thing I knew, I was going to visit Alan, and we're at Surrey Memorial Hospital, so right across the street there's a Dairy Queen. And I show up with like a double cheeseburger and a poutine and like a blizzard.
I got the shot right here.
Oh yeah, he's actually got a picture of it.
There's his coping.
Oh my God, you are so, can we please include that picture?
Obviously wasn't for him because he wasn't able to eat any of that stuff on the renal diet he was being given. So here I am right beside him, scarfing down all this junk food. And I don't think it really hit me that I was doing that right in front of him, because I was kind of on autopilot, just trying to like literally cram joy down my gullet to make things better. We joke about it now, but I think that's kind of the first reaction I had was just, how do I cope with this? After that, I think I started thinking about, okay, well, what can I do to help other than be around and hang out with him and just take his mind off of things? And I started to think about, like, I've heard a lot about transplants, obviously. What can I do could I be a donor?
Was it at this point that you started a search for a living donor, or?
I see myself as an independent person, and I find it difficult sometimes to ask for help. And so there were discussions, especially by my care team, about whether or not I should reach out to the community, to family members, to friends, to see whether or not there was anyone that would be willing to participate in a donation. I chose not to proceed that way. I wasn't shy about sharing the diagnosis and my need for one. However, I don't really think I solicited anybody to donate.
I think the first thing we all thought of when we thought about kind of the next steps for transplants, whether it's going to be within our family or outside of it, was, I'm the youngest in our family. We have two parents, and I thought this is a responsibility for me, and I want to step up to this challenge and do what I can to help my brother out. It did take some time, and that's something I did tell Alan multiple times. I felt guilty that it took me so long to start doing the process, but I did get in touch with my family physician. I talked to the various BC transplant sources and just started reading. And Kidney Foundation looked at some of the sources there, and just what do I need to do? And I started to look into that and talk to my family doctor to start on it.
So through the testing process, what did you end up finding out?
Through the testing process, we did a whole bunch of blood work, some urinalysis. We were really excited to find out the same blood type as Ellen, and we're both O negative, and it's a tough match, especially with two brothers. So we were really happy, and we were thinking, hey, there's a really good chance here.
And he undertook the screening process in order to be validated for it.
It's a long process too, isn't it?
It's not a simple one. There's obviously blood work.
As we went through the tests and we started to get some results back, we found out I had red blood cells in my urine, which is irregular, but not the worst thing either. As I understand it, it can happen in some athletes, and not that I'm a really good athlete or anything like that, but we started to follow up a little bit more, and the main concern was whether I had any protein in my urine. There was only one way to find out. After the urinalysis showed that there was no protein in the urine, but to really definitively see what was going on with the kidney, because it's not again, it's not unusual for there to be red blood cells, but it's curiosity, especially if you're going to be donating to somebody, right?
And one of the bigger challenges is a kidney biopsy.
The biopsy was an interesting experience. It was at St. Paul's Hospital, and I'm hoping that is the closest I'll ever have to being with an operation or a transplant or anything like that. So it's a day procedure. I was put into a gown. I was given a bed. I was brought down to the room, and they gave me some local anesthetic. And so they got the results, and it was not exactly what we were hoping for.
So unfortunately, when Eric conducted his biopsy, it was discovered that he also had the same underlying condition for my kidney disease. And so it first invalidated him as a donor.
It was pretty crappy. I think I felt like I was really letting Alan down, letting our family down, because we were going through all these tests, and the blood type was a match. And I think we got really excited about that. And to hear all of a sudden there are significant risks to donating a kidney that has the same markers, and it makes sense. Why would you go through all that, right? So it was, I think disappointing is the best word. Alan was great about it. He never put any pressure on me. He never kind of got his hopes up or anything, saying like this is going to be the exit strategy to all this. So it was just, I think the resiliency our entire family has gained through all this is just, it's another speed bump. Let's just get past it, support one another, and see what else we can do.
It also created this additional concern that he may encounter the same kidney problems that I've had.
What they found out was I actually have IgA markers on my kidney as well, and I have the potential to develop the same disease as Alan.
But fortunately, so far, his kidney function remains as normal, and because of the ability for us to catch it early, it's been well taken care of.
It's not nearly as progressed as his was at the time. So fortunate in the sense that we got to catch it proactively and are able to keep an eye on it and do regular testing and kind of the preventative aspects to it.
So why don't you tell me about the whole transplant process?
So you know about and think you're prepared for the call when all the materials that you receive tell you about what to expect when you finally do receive the phone call for the transplant. But when you receive that call and you have the doctor on the other end letting you know that a kidney has become available for you, are you able to come in tomorrow? I was shaking. I didn't know what to think about it. I like I said, thought I was prepared. I said, yes, let's do it. But after I hung up, I just sat there for a moment thinking to myself, like, what's happening? Like, how is this gonna look?
Yeah, when Alan called me after he got the call from St. Paul's, you would think you would be just jumping up and down with joy and just utter jubilation, but I gotta say, I was quite scared. I was worried. Around that time, a close friend of mine, he had gone through a cardiac transplant, and he had received his second heart, actually. And through the operation, he never woke up. So thinking that my brother was also gonna go through something very similar, in a major surgery, he's gonna get a transplant, he's gonna be put under. As much as I was happy to hear he got the call, I was also, all these thoughts were racing through my mind because I had almost an identical conversation with my friend. He said, I got the call from St. Paul's, I'm going down right away. And he was excited. And I remember like him and I were texting back and forth leading up to the surgery. And the last question I asked him was, hey, how's it going? And I never got a response. So that was kind of weighing on my mind. Obviously, my family was very happy. Part of me was happy, but I did express to Alan that I was worried. And he's a trooper. He's like, you know what, we're gonna do everything we can, right? Like, this is what we've been waiting for. I've been on dialysis for however many years, and this is what I need to do next. So we're gonna go in understanding the risks. And I think when he said that kind of stuff to me, I just felt a lot more relieved, reassured. Because at the end of the day, it's his experience, but as family members, you want to support. It was a combination of excitement, combination of significant nerves and fear. But I'm just very happy that it worked out for Alan. Unfortunately, it did not work out for my other friends, but that's the risk that transplants come with, right? It was a bit of a challenge processing that when I first got the phone call.
So the following day, early in the morning, I went to the hospital and prepared for the transplant. It included very minimal liquids, a fair bit of testing to ensure that there were no last-minute bugs that might affect the success of the transplant and the surgery. And it was not until late in the evening, about 4 a.m., when I was informed that the surgical theater is ready, the organ is ready, and I was wheeled downstairs.
I think I was at work, and I haven't really had the opportunity to look at my personal phone during my day, but that day, or those couple of days, I kept it with me everywhere.
Waking up was it was a dreamlike state, obviously, partly due to the drugs. The anesthetic was still wearing off, and but at the same time, it was the realization that the surgery was over, and I was still there. There was no complications.
When Alan sent me a text message after he got out, I was so relieved. I was so relieved, so happy, and it seemed like he was no worse off for wear, really. He was quite normal. We chatted on the phone, and we were just so happy.
And so I sat in the come-down ward for a couple of hours, and in that time, I just felt this overwhelming relief.
I think just given what had happened with my friend, I was just so relieved and so grateful, so thankful that he was up and about his own wits, and he had made it through.
It wasn't quite over yet, because obviously I had to heal from the transplant, but at least it was over, and that, from what the surgeon said, it was a huge success.
Why don't you tell me about the whole life after transplant?
The recovery process was more or less okay. There was a minor complication with a potential rejection, but the care team very quickly identified it and treated it. And within a week, I was home. Pain was minimal, and I feel like the discomfort primarily was if I had to cough. And I think that's something that's probably pretty similar with any other surgery.
I remember after he got discharged and he went home, we went over like immediately. I honestly don't remember if we brought anything specifically. We didn't bring Dairy Queen, but we just got together, and I still remember he was wearing this ratty shirt he likes. It's like a PJ shirt essentially, and he's just sitting there, and he was sore because of the surgery and all that, so we weren't moving around very much and all that. And
being at home, however, life got a little bit more difficult. Having to move around at home made things a little bit trickier in terms of pain management.
Didn't want to hug him, didn't want to get too close and all that kind of stuff because of COVID and all that. But we were just, very, very happy, very relieved for him to be home. And I think it just felt so much more real for him to be in his own home and us to be there outside of a hospital setting. So that was really good.
Within a month, I was able to be at about 80% capacity. Of course, I was careful with the way I moved, but it was surprisingly quick.
So on that note, what is the first meal you had after your transplant that you really felt excited about?
Potatoes. I love potatoes, and potatoes, unfortunately, are quite high in potassium. So I could only eat them in small doses, or I would have my dietitian upset at me saying, like, why'd you do this again? And so, I honestly don't recall the first meal, because I think I was still a little bit drugged up on the painkillers. But I do recall potatoes being the first meal that I was really like, yes, this is the life. So, yeah, some potatoes.
And what, do you want to tell us about the anniversary that you just celebrated?
Yeah, I celebrated the 1-year transplantiversary of the surgery, and while we didn't do anything necessarily to celebrate, I think we're waiting for the weekend to do that.
There's a movie we've been meaning to watch for a long time, Dune. It's quite popular, and growing up we used to play the video game, so it's been a long time that we have not watched it, and we've been putting it off. So we're going to celebrate, maybe have some good food, and maybe a beverage or two, and just relax and take it easy. Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
It's hard to believe that it's been a year, and that the state of my life now is so different from a year prior. When I went into the surgery, I thought I was in great shape. I tolerated peritoneal dialysis extraordinarily well, but now being, a year after the transplant, I realized just how much impact my health had on my overall life. My energy levels are far, far better than I had when I was on dialysis. So, long story short, we're gonna celebrate on the weekend just to be able to, really be grateful for the second lease on life I've had.
Awesome. And then what would you like to say, or what was one thing you might want to say to our viewers about kidney disease, organ donation, or the transplant process? If somebody was going to take one thing away from watching today.
If there's one thing that you should take away from this, it's that you should get checked early. My brother was so fortunate that just by virtue of being assessed for donation, we found what could potentially become end-stage renal disease. And so if there is one thing, it's to get yourself checked. You can contact your GP for a simple blood test, and they'll be able to take care of you.
So obviously you're a really huge support system for your brother, for Alan, you're very close. For our listeners that are watching right now that are, having a loved one that's going through kidney disease or kidney transplant, what words of encouragement or support would you say to them?
Don't wolf down Dairy Queen in front of them. The words of encouragement I would have for family or friends that are trying to support somebody who's going through chronic kidney disease and the diagnosis and the ongoing treatment or dialysis or anything like that is just check in, ask questions. Don't feel like you're bothering, and obviously you can suss out the situation, but I think just kind of, every couple of weeks, ask them how they're doing physically, mentally, just being in touch, asking how their day went, sending them stupid videos on YouTube, and just being there for them. I think kind of putting yourself out there all the time, and they can let you know if you're being overbearing. I'm not saying bombard them every single day, but I think that type of just giving them something else to think about and knowing that people care for them and are thinking about them all the time. And I think that's really important.
Awesome, that's a wrap. Thanks for being here today, Eric.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. That was fun.
Yeah.